Episode 11, The Dark Secret. Anya uncovers a dark secret about the Oku's past. The aftermath of the battle with the lost city left a profound mark on Anya and her team. The physical scars were healing, but the psychological wounds ran deep. The world they once knew had been irrevocably altered, and they were left to navigate a new reality, one filled with uncertainty and fear. Despite the trauma, Anya was drawn back to the Oku forest. It was here, amidst the towering redwoods and whispering pines, that she found solace. The forest was healing, its energy soothing her troubled soul. But beneath the surface of tranquility, a dark current was stirring. As she delved deeper into the forest, she noticed anomalies. Plants that had once flourished were withering, and the once clear streams were murky and polluted. The animals, once filled with a wild spirit, seemed subdued, their eyes holding a vacant stare. Anya's intuition, sharpened by her experiences, told her that something was wrong. The forest was sick, and the cause was not natural. Driven by a sense of urgency, she began to investigate. She talked to the indigenous people who lived on the fringes of the forest, seeking clues, any information that could shed light on the changes. Their stories were filled with dread. They spoke of strange lights in the sky, of unnatural phenomena, and of creatures that did not belong in the forest. Anya's research led her to a forgotten diary, hidden deep within the archives of a local university. It belonged to a botanist who had disappeared while studying the Oku forest decades ago. The diary detailed the botanist's growing obsession with the forest, and with it, a disturbing discovery. The botanist had found evidence of ancient experiments conducted deep within the heart of the forest. It seemed that a secret government agency had been using the Oku as a testing ground for biological weapons. The experiments had gone awry, creating a monstrous hybrid that had escaped containment. The implications were staggering. The changes in the forest, the strange occurrences, the creatures with vacant eyes, they were all connected to these experiments. The Oku, once a sanctuary of life, had been transformed into a living nightmare. Anya felt a surge of anger and despair. The forest, her beloved home, had been betrayed, and the consequences of these actions were far-reaching, threatening the entire planet. She gathered her team, sharing her findings. The news was met with disbelief, then horror. They were facing a new enemy, a man-made monster that was slowly poisoning the earth. They decided to expose the truth. They would go public with their findings, hoping to spark a global outcry. But they knew they would face opposition. The government agency responsible for the experiments would do everything in its power to protect its secrets. The road ahead was fraught with danger, but Anya was determined. She had faced darkness before, and she would face it again. The forest and the world needed her. Anya and her team found themselves at the precipice of a new reality. The Oku forest, once a symbol of hope and renewal, was now a battleground, a microcosm of the larger struggle between humanity and its destructive impulses. Exposing the truth was a perilous undertaking. The government agency responsible for the experiments was a powerful entity, with deep pockets and a ruthless disregard for human life. Anya and her team knew they would face opposition, but they were determined to expose the truth. They started by gathering evidence. They collected soil samples, water samples, and plant specimens. They interviewed former employees of the government agency, offering them immunity in exchange for information. Slowly but surely, they built a case against the perpetrators. But the government agency was not idle. They launched a smear campaign against Anya and her team, accusing them of being eco-terrorists and conspiracy theorists. Their reputation was tarnished, their credibility questioned. The pressure mounted. Threats were made against their families, their homes were surveilled, and their every move was monitored. But Anya and her team refused to be intimidated. They knew the stakes were too high. The world watched with growing interest. The story of the contaminated forest, of the government's reckless experiments, was a headline grabber. People were outraged, demanding answers. But there were also those who dismissed the claims as sensationalism, refusing to believe the government would be capable of such atrocities. Anya and her team knew they had to act fast. The contamination was spreading, and the consequences could be catastrophic. They needed to find a way to neutralize the toxic substance, to restore the forest to its former glory. They turned to the indigenous people, the original guardians of the forest. They possessed a deep knowledge of the land, an understanding of its rhythms and secrets. Perhaps they held the key to reversing the damage. With their help, Anya and her team began to develop a plan. It was a long shot, but it was their only hope. They would use ancient rituals, combined with modern science, to purify the forest. The task was monumental. They faced countless challenges, from hostile weather conditions to the constant threat of discovery, but they persevered, driven by a sense of purpose that transcended their personal fears. As they worked, they began to see signs of hope. The once lifeless plants showed signs of recovery, and the animals seemed less agitated. The forest was fighting back, and with their help, it might just prevail. But the battle was far from over. The government agency, desperate to protect its secrets, was increasing its efforts to stop them. Anya and her team knew they were being watched, every move monitored. They lived in constant fear of capture, of being silenced. Yet they pressed on. The fate of the forest, and perhaps the planet, rested on their shoulders. They were the last line of defense, the guardians of a dying world. The climax was inevitable. After months of evasion and subterfuge, Anya and her team found themselves cornered. The government agency, desperate to protect its dark secret, had launched a full-scale operation to neutralize them. The forest, once a sanctuary, had become a battlefield. Armed helicopters circled overhead, their rotors churning the air into a vortex of fear. A SWAT team, equipped with state-of-the-art weaponry, advanced through the undergrowth, their boots crunching on the fallen leaves. Anya and her team retreated deeper into the forest, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had prepared for this moment, but nothing could have prepared them for the intensity of the attack. Evelyn, with her knowledge of the forest, led the way. She knew every hidden path, every secret clearing. Ben, the engineer, was tasked with disabling the enemy's technology, while Maya focused on providing spiritual support, drawing strength from the ancient wisdom of the forest. The chase was relentless. The sound of gunfire echoed through the trees, the smell of cordite filling the air. The team moved like shadows, their survival instincts honed to razor sharpness. As they fled, they continued their work on the purification process. They had to find a way to neutralize the toxic substance before it was too late. The fate of the forest, and perhaps the planet, depended on their success. Anya, carrying the burden of leadership, felt a surge of determination. She had come too far to give up now. The forest was her home, and she would protect it at any cost. They reached a hidden clearing, a place of ancient power. The heart-shaped tree, though weakened, still stood, a symbol of hope. They gathered around it, forming a circle of protection. The enemy closed in. The sound of approaching footsteps was deafening. Anya could feel the fear, the desperation, but she refused to succumb. She drew strength from the forest, from the spirits of those who had come before her. Then it happened. The heart-shaped tree erupted in a blinding light. A wave of energy, pure and potent, washed over them. The forest responded, its ancient power unleashed. The enemy was caught in the crossfire. Their weapons malfunctioned, their communication systems failed. The forest itself seemed to be fighting back, the trees rising to defend their home. The battle raged on, a clash between humanity and nature. In the end, it was the forest that prevailed. The enemy retreated, defeated, leaving behind a trail of destruction. The forest was scarred, but it was alive. The purification process, accelerated by the surge of energy, was complete. The toxic substance was neutralized, and the forest was beginning to heal. Anya and her team emerged from the clearing, exhausted but triumphant. They had faced the darkness, and they had emerged victorious. The forest was saved, and with it, a glimmer of hope for the planet. The road to recovery would be long and arduous, but they had taken the first step. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The fight for a sustainable future had just begun.